Alright, so I just sent Chief Robert another request. Robert, did you see the request I sent you? Well, okay. Let me try to add you. Greetings, Robert Press. Muito Goyon. Vitória Nunes. Muito Goyon. Trying to add the chief now. Ghost. Muito Goyon. Angela. Muito Goyon. Esther. Muito Goyon. Mabriga. Aurabuni. Trying to add the chief now. And it's still in the adding phase. Greetings, Brother Malik. Muito Goyon. Alan Palmer. Muito Goyon. Tony Cooper. Muito Goyon. Greetings. Robert, you're declining my invite. That's the message that I'm getting. You had to accept the invite, Robert. You're not gonna try another chips? The other chips? Oh, huh? Oh, Joe, that's too much sugar for you, Joe. The sugar brings you up like high, and then it brings you down too. Like, shouldn't be eating that much sugar. Oh, I got time. Yeah, I think so. If you eat too much sugar, it's not good. Robert is saying that you declined the invite. The, the cell phone is freezing.
Finally.
Roberts,
What
muito
a journey.
bom. Muito obrigado.
Muito good. Muito good, you
You don't look too clear.
Yeah, this phone ain't great. I was hoping to use the fancy laptop.
Okay.
And then it's telling me I had to rotate the phone. That's why it kept rejecting.
Yeah, because I like the landscape view instead of the portrait.
Yeah.
But I guess that's fine enough. That's fine enough. So when I think of
Good.
Jamaica, I think of reggae. I think of Ital stew, which is my favorite dish because I'm trying to transition into a plant-based diet. I think of
Okay.
oxtail.
Mhm.
I think of dance hall,
All right.
but I don't think of Taino Indians or Native
All right.
Americans. So can you give me a history lesson of the Taino in Jamaica?
All right. First off, it's a tricky history lesson because it's clearly not taught in our schools. It's not really a lot of public knowledge because of the paper genocide that took place.
Right,
They wrote us out of the books of the history,
right,
even though the census was showing that people were claiming that identity, even though there was evidence in the the documentation that they had from Spanish period, because the British came here in the 1600s. There was information showing that there was Taino people here. They have on records from the abbots the amount of people that came that were Tainos, that were, what you call that now, they went for confession. So they have it in the records, but the information that the academics shared here was mostly now. First, um, that there was this genocide that everyone died off. Second, that for us here on the island, there was, how best to put it into words, there was not much retention. There was a lot of Afrocentrism when it came to retentions in the culture here that came from the indigenous people, that came from my ancestors, that came from the Taino. And then there wasn't that much connection between the Maroons that held a lot of that history and the
right.
rest of the Jamaican populace, because there was a period where the narrative was that the Maroons were traitors, that they would return slaves to plantations. So there are a lot of periods of those who had information that you were locked off from them. The consensus was that, all right, these indigenous people, or these people claiming to be indigenous, are crazy, and then the Maroons that have that culture and that teaching and that retention, that they're traitors, so they're against the regular populace. So there was a lot of periods of mm, it's the best word to use. There are a lot of periods where the information that was being put out was this narrative of anything that was before the British, the mighty saviors, was bad. And that's what you should adapt, that's what you should learn and take their narrative. And then the history part that I can share is that what they were teaching in schools is first that there were Arawaks here, which there weren't. They were teaching that later on they adopted and acknowledged that it was an Arawakan language that our ancestors spoke. And they started to use the academic term Taino for all of the people that were in the Caribbean. Even though we dispute the fact that our ancestors identified, meaning using that term Taino, because for us, through language studies, we know that means relative. Like, you would be ni Taino, you'd be the Taino, my
Right.
relative, right? But in academics, it's the term used for that level, that wave of migration to the Caribbean. So I know this is going to open up a lot more questions, so I'm ready for that.
Yeah, I mean, because some people are confused in regards to, well, I would say they just don't know. Because
Yeah.
the way I explain it is that there were several groups in the Greater Antilles that like the Lucayu,
Mm-hmm.
the Siboney,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Native American.
Wanahata Bay. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Wanahata Bay in Cuba, where that Guantanamo Bay, that name came from.
Okay.
You had Siguayo, you had um, Igneri, Kalinago, right? So there were several groups, and the use for Taino is basically uh, a culture that came from a mixture of groups.
The
So it
Taino.
had
And
a
now
little,
we're talking about Jamaica
yeah,
now. We're talking about just Jamaica
yeah.
now.
Well, we're talking about all over because the term Taino was really from a mixture of group, different waves of migration, and each brought something else that was added to that culture, to
Okay.
what they see as a Taino today. So in Borinquen, you had the Kalinago that was a part of it, the Igneri that was a part of it, and the last wave they considered Taino. In Jamaica, we had the Siboney and we had the Igneri, right? And then the last wave that came, they called that group that had a mixture with the Siboney and with the Igneri, Taino. So that's kind of what ties all of these islands together, the culture. And the academics tend to look towards the pottery for a part of their classification as well. So it's a lot of relearning and unlearning because we've grown so much from what was taught prior, and it's a lot of reintegration and acknowledgement. In the schools now, they're still teaching narrative that most died out, that we're extinct, which we're working to have that change. Now they're using the term Taino instead of Caribs. They're using Kalinago. So there is some very slow movement taking place. And then we have events that take place that bring more awareness to the Taino's descendants here and those that are claiming to identify as that. Because all of the Tainos on this island acknowledge our African ancestry, acknowledge that we are mixed people, and want to honor our Taino ancestors that named this island, that are on our coat of arms, that are on our funds, our currency that we spend, that they are part of who we are, and we pay homage to all these other aspects of who we are, except for those who were here first. So that's a part of what the movement is like here on the island.
So what percentage of Jamaica you would say is Taino, and what area or provinces in Jamaica do the Taino reside at?
All right, percentage based on DNA tests that have been done with like 23andMe and places like that, it would be somewhere around probably 4%. But it was in a small group in specific areas. I know that they did tests in a Maroon community, an area close to a Maroon community on the west of the island that is called Akompong, which is one of the
Akompong.
Maroon villages.
Now
Yeah,
that sounds, is that where they have the large group of people from Akan in Ghana? Because
yeah.
Akompong means
So
Akan in Ghana, and it's related to that group that came from Ghana.
yeah, exactly. So from that group, which should have had the smallest percentage, if any, of Taino or indigenous Caribbean DNA, they found 4%. They didn't test the Windward Maroons, which would have been those that escaped during the Spanish period. The ones in Akompong came later, like probably around 1500s, right? And when they
Wait.
came,
Hold on. Before you go on, before I don't want to lose nobody. So you say the
yeah,
Spanish
yeah,
period. The Spaniards were in Jamaica from what time to what time?
1494
1494 until
to, to somewhere in the 1500s. I don't remember the exact date.
okay, and then the English came in.
Yeah,
I'm assuming.
correct,
Okay.
correct. And what happened is when the English came, it was around probably 50 or almost 100 years. It was a long battle. Like people will hear the history and think that, okay, the Spanish were here, the English came, and probably in a week or two or a month. No, that was like ongoing, setting up of forts, training the slaves that were now freed, which is important. The Spanish freed the slaves they had. And there's this concept when we speak about the slaves during the Spanish period, they tend to forget that there were indigenous people here. And those indigenous people would have been counted in that group of slaves.
Okay.
They also forget to include that the Spanish had not conquered the entire island. They were in sections of the island, right? So there were groups that were not disturbed, that were not contacted. Now, the narrative is that those that were freed, some went to the mountains. And that was the first group of Maroons in the Windward Islands, which today their descendants would be Moortown, um, Scots Hall, and Charlestown, which original name was Kojotown, right? These are the
Kujo,
three maroon villages. Kojo,
Kujo,
correct.
Kujo town.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that name Kujo is synonymous with other islands in the Caribbean. Cujo, because it's spelled Cudjoe, and it's also with a
Mm-hmm,
Kudjoe.
mm-hmm,
Like one of my friends is a
mm-hmm,
Cujo, and she's from Grenada, I believe. Grenada or
mm-hmm,
Montserrat, one of those islands.
mm-hmm. So those groups have the higher percentage of retention because they were from the Spanish period. So when the information came out and they were saying that, hey, they found 4% in Akompong and those areas to the west of the island, I was amazed because I didn't think they'd find much from there. So I'm looking for when studies are done with the Widmod Maroons, which are those three groups, those three villages that are listed, that would have had a higher retention because there are medicines that we use here, there are roots beverages that we use here that are synonymous that they use on Quisqueya, Dominican Republic, and other islands that have that retention. There are plant medicines that are used here that literally it's only on this island. There's a plant here that we call search my heart that is only in Jamaica. So we know that was something that was passed on through traditions, right? So there are pockets of retention here that confirm that narrative that extinction didn't take place. And then the areas, as you were asking, is the eastern parts of the island, the southern coast of the island. So Manchester, Spanish Town, St. Catherine, St. Thomas, St. Anne, St. Mary. And on the west of the island, you have Hanover and other sites. And then there are a lot of sites where, I mean, you find Taino artifacts, you find middens, mountains of seashells in the middle of the island. And it's so commonplace, and because of what is taught in school, people don't even second think it. I've gone to spaces and seen Taino shell tools, and everyone walks past it as if it's nothing. But I mean, if the narrative is that all these people are extinct and they had died off from so long ago, and we don't really pay homage to it or honor it, then we're not going to notice it in our day-to-day lives. And that's a strong part of what this movement and resurgence is doing. And I mean, this resurgence on this island has been going on for over 30 years. I mean, I'm a young one in the resurgence, right? It's been a lot of hard work. It's been from the academic level where they've been trying to point out and show and get those grants and those fundings to preserve some of these sites. I mean, it's been rough, brother.
Hmm.
It's one thing to have, the Spanish come in and but to have the Spanish come in, break down your culture, and then have the English come in and do the same, and then a lot of that information was lost. And as you know, the common language here is English, other than our Creole. So even the documents that would have been around that would have spoken towards some of this, it's not here. It's in somewhere in Spain, and you have to dig deep to find that, to find the stories about the Native American cowboys that were here on the island, you know, that were tending to these farms, that were growing crops, and the farming style that they use that were incorporated still to today, of the procedure of making bami, kasabi, that is still practiced here today. All of these things, it's, I'd like to shine more light on that. The barbacoa or jerk chicken here that they said came from Africa, which it didn't, right? All of these practices to bring awareness and pay homage to the first people of this island. I believe that is necessary for a lot of healing to take place. There's a lot of crazy things going on out there where it comes to identity, where it comes to people or melanated people or people of color. And Jamaica is not free of those issues. We have those issues here. We have people bleaching them skin, buying soaps, all sorts of products so that they can look lighter, fairer, you know, creaming them hair, getting rid of them kinky curls. And this concept in them head that, you know, anybody with indigenous ancestry is supposed to look a certain way, and
Right.
they should be squinting with their eyes, and you know,
Hmm.
you know, it's to change a lot of those narratives. It's for them to understand that we've been here, and those that are joining the movement now and feeling a lot of honor that, yeah, they can claim this island. And you know, the story that my grandmother was, we used to hear that so much when I was doing research and connecting with, you know, descendants. My grandmother was Indio, or one of the terms they use here on the island is Injin, to separate from the East Indian. My grandmother was Injin, you know, my grandmother was Arawak. And I'm like,
Okay.
you mean your grandmother was? Then you are. You know, like what's so hard to claim and accept that? Why take the narrative that your people, that we are extinct? And I guess it was easier to do that because it's rough to choose to step out like this. There is no glory, there is no privilege, there's no land that you're going to get. There's It's not like the United States where you're going to get all of these funds. Like, it's real deep soul work to say in this day and age that, you know, Dakayame Taino, you know, that's what I am, and that's what I'm pushing. It wasn't easy in my own family, because my family is Maroon and we have Taino ancestry. And the Maroon aspect and the indigenous aspect wasn't something that was honored. And I explained that to you before. It's because that narrative that was shared that, you know, they were traitors
Right.
because of these treaties. And I have to put this out there that of the Windward Maroons, one of our great heroes, Nanny of the Maroons, she was gifted land. She did not sign a treaty. So even that narrative, yes, other villages signed a treaty, but even the narrative that the Maroons were traitors because in the treaty it said that they had to return slaves. Like, that's what the colonizer wrote on paper. You have no list or evidence and say, all right, these are all of the slaves that were returned and these are the families that returned them. But once it's written in a book, they just accept, okay, they said that to get this land, they had to do this, so they must have done it. And I'm saying, you know, these people as freedom fighters, that's the story. You know that they have been raiding these plantations since touching this soil. And you're just going to believe now this narrative that, okay, because they have the land, they must have done exactly what the colonizer told them. No, like, that makes no sense to me. So there is a lot of loopholes in the narratives, and I guess we're so used to being spoon fed, we just took it.
Hmm.
So it's a change now.
I mean, you covered a lot
Change
of ground so
now.
far, and a couple of things stood out. You said that people still eat bami and the
Yeah,
cassava bread in Jamaica.
yeah.
Which particular community in particular still have that practice? Like they have like the festival because in St. Vincent every year around National Heroes Day, there's a community called Greg's, and they
Mhm.
build the community in such a way that it looks like it's going back to the indigenous period. Do they have something like that in Jamaica?
We don't have a Bami festival, but during some communities will have like Woodside that has strong Taino retention, and Cross Keys in St. Mary and Mandeville regions. What they'll have is, you know, any cultural celebrations, you'll have people showing you how to make Bami, and they'll speak towards that, and they'll speak towards, you know, that retention and that culture there. Even the Marcus Garvey Day celebrations that we have here, I mean, they're proud of that. The era that Marcus Garvey came from in Jamaica had strong Taino retention as well, and Taino presence, and still to this day. So we don't have a Bami festival. I remember some groups speaking towards doing something like that to promote it. I know that some communities like Woodside have been getting funding to help to preserve that practice so that it's there for future generations. Like, a lot of this is really to hold on to what we have and to honor it, cherish it, nourish it, so it grows for future generations. You know, we can't allow it to be slipping away. And I have to share that for me and for our tribe, there's a tendency for groups that are claiming their Taino ancestry to skip out 500 years and behave as if they want to, pick up from 1492 or 1494 as it relates to Jamaica, and dress in regalia and feather headdress, and it's a real nice show and it looks nice, right? But they do away with all of the sacrifices that the ancestors did for all those 500 and odd years. Like, so much happened since, and there's so much learning that took place since. I mean, my grandfather would practice certain ceremonies as a Christian in the church, just doing construction work. He would have a fowl and he'd make an offering to the four corners so that there would be no accident on the work site. You get me?
Mm.
So there are different retentions and practices that have been taking place. And for me, like, I, I believe we need to honor that. Can't just write all of that out. You know, it's not just the Hatuis and all of these other caciques that need sacrifices for us. It's my ancestors from the 1700s. It's my ancestors from the 1600s. They made sacrifices too. Without them, I wouldn't have the medicines and the ceremonies and the rituals and these techniques of making food and making the hammock and all of these things that we have today. Wouldn't have the technique of making the maracas that we have today. So why do away with all of that? The romanticism. So I had to share that as well. That for us here in the island is not to segregate and separate. You know, it's to share, to bring honor to, and to educate all of Jamaica and the Caribbean on these retentions, on who to pay homage to for these practices, and to incorporate it as a part of the heritage of Jamaicans overall.
Excuse me. A lot of Garifuna people listen to dancehall and reggae music. Um, which artists from the past to the present that you know of have Taino heritage?
An artist, that's a tricky one. I don't do a lot of research into artists. And again, it's not something that was spoken of proudly. Um, the narrative of the traitors from the Maroons, there's a lot of ridicule to those that claim
Mm.
Taino ancestry, back then Arawakan ancestry. They treated us like we were crazy,
Hmm.
you know? It was, yeah, I'm being real. Like, they treated us like it was crazy. Like, for me, I remember that moment when I was in history class, and at that point, I didn't know about my ancestry. Like, no one said anything to me. It's a term that is used in the community here of blood memory, where I don't know if that makes sense to you, but they're just some things that you knew, and I just felt offended, like deeply offended when they were talking and they were saying that this genocide and infanticide and or people killed off all their kids. And I just got up and walked out of the class, and I was like, "What the this? None of this is right." And my spirit told me that, all right, a lot of the lessons that I need, I'd get from that Maroon community, and the ancestors set it up so that I connected with them and started to learn more, and then from there, a lot of doors opened up. So I was able to learn and grow and develop. Um, Popular figures that I know of, I guess a singer, funnily enough, it's coming to my mind now. Um, I can check on her name, but there is a female singer that has Taino ancestry that's around today, but doesn't really speak about it much. I know before the end of the show, I can share the name with you.
Okay.
I'm a Google searcher now.
You do know that Tanya Stevens and
Ah,
Aurelio Martinez, which is our cultural ambassador, they were singing one of his songs in Honduras about a couple of years ago, and she caught up on the lyrics so quickly.
what?
Yeah, I gotta share that video with you. It's on YouTube. Tanya Stevens and Aurelio. I'm familiar with Jamaican music because here in New York, I DJ and I study African diaspora music in
Okay.
addition to Garifuna music. And one of the reasons I do that is because I'm listening to the linkages with the rhythms.
Hmm.
But there is
Okay.
a Taino museum in Jamaica, right? Which province is that in?
In Kingston.
In Kingston. Okay.
Kingston, the National Gallery has pieces and the museum has pieces. So actually I have pieces in the National Gallery as well. Art gallery.
Okay. And these are
So
all
I mean,
from different areas of Jamaica.
correct.
Okay.
Um, one of the things since becoming cacique that I want to work on is remittance of a lot of the remains of our ancestors, because I know they found a lot of remains of ancestors. So it's to do a ceremony and get a site and truly honor them in a good way. Um, a lot of the archaeological work done here was rushed. I mean, it's crazy. We have found things here that change the narrative where it comes to Jamaica compared to the other islands in crazy ways. And I guess it's just time for that to be released. So, for example, we found that our ancestors had like cacao here, like they were drinking hot chocolate,
Okay.
which wasn't very commonplace. The assumption before is that that was done by the Mayans and that was done in Central America. So again, that confirms that connection. We have artifacts made from obsidian. Again, confirms that connection, that strong connection with Central America, because we don't have natural deposits of obsidian here. And what was happening is a lot of the development, like on highways, things like that, forced what was going through these some of these sites. So the archaeologists had to rush and try to get as much as they could before they started to do their development. And then we're very spiritual people here. I remember when I was going to school, one of my classmates at their home, they found a skull. And the assumption was, I don't know if you guys know about Obia, but it's like
Obia.
voodoo.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
although it's a traditional African-based religion, a lot of
yeah.
it's a religion, pretty much. But I
Yeah.
prefer to call it a spiritual system
Yeah.
because it's not
So,
that organized like a religion where we have saints and
mhm,
Bible. And it's a traditional spiritual system.
exactly. So there was the assumption that a lot of the stuff people would find um, was someone practicing Obia on them. So the skull that was found that was damaged, I thought they were breaking this Obia, this spell someone was trying to put on it. They found out it was a Taino skull. Like they were living on top of like a site that had artifacts. So people are finding things and destroying them or selling them and getting rid of them because they're very spiritual people. I mean, Taino sites that are protected here, it's because people from African ancestry, like Akan spiritual practices, honor those sites and they'll go there and they'll do rituals. I mean, it's very different here. And I really am happy for the opportunity to share about stuff like this. We here on this island are very spiritual. I know one of the questions you're asking is, how that whole process of becoming cacique. And again, that was something that was spiritual. Like for us, it wasn't an election, like I heard you mention,
Hmm.
right? I went on a spiritual run to represent all Tainos of the region. I had anticipated I'd only be representing the Tainos of Jamaica. It's called the Peace and Dignity Journeys. It happens every 4 years since 1992. So this is a brief story about me, because this is not about me, but explaining my connection. The first tradition that I was initiated under was from the Andes Mountains, and was under the prophecy of the eagle and the condor. And this came to me, like when I say came to me, a practitioner came to this island and was sharing. That was a part of it. The eagle and the condor coming together again. And what the prophecy says is that every 500 years there's a Pachacuti, which means like an upheaval. The imagery to visualize is the world turning upside down. So, the houses are on the ceiling and things are falling out of them. A great shift. And that normally happens to create balance every 500 years. And when the Spaniards came, they separated the eagle from the condor, the north from the south. So 500 years after that, to bring balance, the eagle and the condor would have to come back together again. The eagle being the north, the condor representing the south. So the healing practices I learned was under that prophecy of, they're sharing it with other islands, with other people that they feel guided to bring things back together again. And I heard there was a spiritual run taking place that individuals from Alaska and Argentina were running to meet in the center representing the eagle and the condor. So I said, I have to be a part of that. And it was through an Akan shrine house that I got the invitation to be a part. So again, you're seeing that there's always these connections. That's how spirit works. And while on the run, I thought I was just going to run, prayers for Jamaica. So we went to New York, met with the other Taino community there, and we were running to Panama. That was in 2016. The run ended in Panama. So from the north and the south would meet together in Panama. And on that run, you're hosted, taken care of by different indigenous groups. So along the way, you're learning their culture. So the Lenape, Dene, all of these different tribes along the route, we're learning from them. We're growing, we're sharing ceremonies. So it helped me to learn more about Taino culture that wasn't so prominent here. Like you have the people, but there wasn't that much of like an organized culture. And after the run, there was just this yearning to share what I had learned. And that run, running from New York to Panama, that was 4.5 months, right? Connecting with other groups and other individuals. From New York to Georgia, that was like all Tainos on that run, from Borinquen, from Quisqueya. But from Georgia all the way to Panama, they handed the staffs over to myself and another sister from Jamaica, Casabiano. So we ended up carrying the prayers for the entire Caribbean region and all of the Taino nations. And, that's where a lot of the connections came from. And coming back here, Spirit impressed upon me that we needed to have a space for the Taino ancestors because we've woken them up with this ceremony and these prayers, and we need somewhere for them to rest. And I was like, I don't even know of anybody else on this island that would be serious about this stuff. Like, something came out in the newspapers in 2014, I am not extinct, and I read it, but that was about it. And, you'd have people that would be selling kind of stuff that they found, but that was about it. And I went to my altar and I prayed about it. And I decided, all right, let me try reaching out to the sister that wrote the article, I am not extinct, and I reached out to her, and as the protocol is, you have to get the blessings from an elder. It has to be female. Like, where am I going to find Taino grandmother that knows she's Taino and wants to honor that? My grandmother didn't want to honor her maroon heritage. And, her grandfather, her father was a maroon Indian, but, not Indian, indigenous. And he was told not to share that with anybody. So I was like, all right, so where can I get this? And follow that guidance. I reached out and I got not just the blessing of that sister, Erika Nigan Gojin, Eri Inaru. I got the blessings of her grandmother. And then I was introduced to a Facebook group called Jamaican Taino Rise that had all these people with Taino ancestry there. And that group has been around for a while. I was like, whoa, when was this? What's going on here? And then through there, I met more grandmothers, and they literally told me that they were waiting on me, and that this is what this group was made for. When the time came, that everyone could come together, and we could create a Yukayeki. From there, I connected with the Taino Bohia Atabe, the Grandmothers Council. That majority of those grandmothers are from Borinquen. So I'll share something with you that not even many in the Taino community itself are like aware of some of this. Not many. As a nation, the Tainos that spanned all of the islands, we had specific islands that we have certain practices. So Borinquen was like our stadium. So there's a lot of bates, there's a lot of ball courts there. And the ball courts were used to settle disputes and for celebrations, all sorts of different things. So everyone would go there for a lot of these activities, right? So there's a lot of retention in Borinquen. There are a lot of sites that are still there in Borinquen. There are a lot of practices. Our creation narrative is from Haiti, Quisqueya. And when I say Haiti or Quisqueya, I mean that whole island.
Mm-hmm.
Because those both names was for the whole island. There was no imaginary line as there is now.
Right.
That's where creation story was from. But a lot of the ceremonies and activities took place in Borinquen. So the grandmothers from Borinquen had a lot of retention when it come to ceremonies. And the protocol was that grandmothers from this island had to write to them requesting for them to come and do the ceremony. So that was done. And then when the grandmothers came, I mean, there was preparations for that ceremony because the caciqueship is normally through a bloodline. So for me to become cacique on this island, I had to go through a certain ceremony that is in our creation narrative of Wahayona, the first cacique. So it was almost as if I was reliving his experiences and taking our sacred medicines, and from that, making an oath to this island. Then there was a public ceremony that you see pictures of and everything, but a lot of it was ceremonial. A lot of it was at any point, guidance could have come from the grandmothers or anyone that I wasn't ready, and then I have to sit it out and wait. So it wasn't as easy as an election.
Mm.
That would have been nice.
Okay.
A popularity contest.
So you're now. Could you give us your title, your official title?
Official title. All right. So for us with a new role or transformation, once you go through a rites of passage, there's an addition to your name. So my spiritual name is Kalan, and I got that from my Peruvian practice, which I use a lot, thinking to probably make it my official middle name. My Christian name, and I literally use that term Christian, is Robert Pierman. My title is Cacique Nibonrish Kaiman. And I learned today that in Garifuna it means grandson of the crocodile.
In Garifuna, which word is that again?
Nibonrish Kaiman.
Iborish.
Mm-hmm.
Niborish with the N. Niborish.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a Garifuna word?
Nibonrish Kaiman. No. In Taino,
Okay.
it means Red River crocodile.
Okay.
Yeah.
Niborish.
So, Cacique Nibonrish Kaiman. And the Kaiman was added after the Cacique ceremony. Taino name I had received on 2016 when I was doing the Peace and Dignity Journeys was Nibonrish.
Okay.
From a Cacique in New York who is from Quisqueya, Warawarish. And that name was because he said he saw me moving so rapidly down, the term the red road they use in North America for, indigenous ways and practices. He said he saw within me a red river, like just the ancestors' knowledge flowing. And I said that made sense because if I'm open to learning and receiving, and it's been over 500 years, and what I saw is that people were rejecting it. Like, I did research and found that some of the artifacts that are in the National Gallery, the recorded story is that there were people that found them. A person found it in a cave and brought it home and had the artifact for a couple of years, right? And returned it to the cave. Like, what the heck happened with that artifact and him for him to return it to the cave? You get me? And then somebody else, and it's recorded like in our documents here that he was doing ceremony with it. Stuff was going on here. So that's why I said that we're highly spiritual on this island, right? So it's just that I'm face, and the hope is that those others that are guided by this will come, will join, will learn. There are more sites to protect. There's more work to do and to share. We get left out of majority of the stuff when it comes to Taino. You hear about all the Latin American places. Everyone that speaks Spanish gets mentioned more than us. That's the fact, you know. You hear about the retention in Cuba, in Quisqueya, in Borinquen, but Jamaica, there's not much to hear about. So
Right.
even more push. to be vocal, to be verbal, to be visible. That we are here, we're organizing and pushing, brother. And my my desire, my push to connect with the Garina group is because of the first vision slash experience that I had was that I should connect with the Maroons. And before even knowing about the Garinagu, what came to me is that the difference between the Maroons and the Garinagu is the island we landed on. Like that was it. If we had landed in Euromen, I'd be Garinagu. I would have had those experiences that you guys had. And from seeing that, from thinking that, from feeling that, even before knowing, a lot more of the history and the culture, I would look on it and think and say, man, what would it have been like if the time period, the 100 years, the 50 years, whatever it took here, and the English, if there wasn't fighting, if it was peace, if we were able to take the best of both cultures, the Akan culture that was here, and and that's what I saw with the Garifuna. I was like, that you guys had that period to develop these things and to have that proper mixture. My Maruna sisters, they were in constant battle. So
Right.
they don't call their leaders chiefs. They still call them colonels. To this day, it's still like a militant type of hierarchy of system. And I had that desire when I went on the run to connect with Garifuna fam. And I thought, which I should have learned from my first spiritual experiences. I thought that I'd probably be sitting at a table having a conversation like I'm having with you now. Nuh-uh. I went to a march in Honduras, and that's another time how we got stuck in Honduras. We
What
went
year
to a
was
march in
this? What
Honduras.
year did you go on a
This
march in
is in
Honduras?
2016.
Okay, so
In
3 years
2016,
ago.
while on the run, was in Honduras, and we, the Jamaicans, were told that we had to get a special passport, even though we had an American visa, to pass through the border of Honduras and Nicaragua. The truth behind that is because elections was going and they didn't want, any indigenous groups passing through.
Right.
But we went to Tegucigalpa, and while there, we went to visit, this march, this Garifuna march that was going on. And I said, man, this feels very dear to me because we were supposed to stay longer in Honduras. I don't know if this is the first time this is going to come out like this, but anyway, it came out here, Garifuna Pablo. Um, we were supposed to stay in Honduras for probably like a week, but the group that we're supposed to stay with there, the main person was assassinated. Real talk.
Berta
And
Caceres?
yep,
That was in March 2016, I believe.
yep. So that's why they were like, all right, let's just hurry up and get through Honduras. And ancestors had it that we ended up being in Honduras for 21 days. We were supposed to rush through Honduras, we ended up being stuck there for 21 days because of all this political stuff in
Right.
Nicaragua. And while there was a march going on, and it was Garifuna doing something beautiful, like watching them with the drums and using the tobacco, and it's like it was just awaking something in me, and I felt tears coming to my eyes. I mean, I'll joke about this now, but
Right.
I realized those tears were starting to burn. And my brother, they were tear gassing us. Like police came and was tear gassing us. They were just there doing ceremony, and they tear gassed us. I mean, little children and elderly people had to go into the pharmacy to get away from all of that. And I saw the police coming and picking up, these Garifuna brothers and driving off with them in a vehicle. So the person that was there with us was saying, we need to follow them and make sure that, everything works out all right, because the police have a habit of um, like dropping people off in some strange places so that people don't know where to get them. And I'm like, what the heck? I remember I wanted to connect with the guy. This is my experience that I'm having here, getting tear gassed and driving down people, making sure that the police don't carry them off somewhere they shouldn't be. And we ended up going to, this is just me and the other Jamaican. We ended up going to the big, like the space, the Bertha space. I think it's called PIN, the organization. Prayers for her and take their flag and add it to one of the prayer staffs that we had, and that's still a part of the prayer staff that is with the nation up north that they use in ceremonies. So that for me showed that, all right, there's a deeper connection with the Garifuna, because I was able to experience like what what was going on, and what it was like. It wasn't just the touristy parts of the experience. It was like getting tear gassed and learning what happens and how you have to look out for the Caribbean. Like, we really need to stick together. And then the deeper that I went into the Taino language, I realized again that connection with the Garifuna through the women's language, right? And I'm saying, all right, there again, like it keeps popping up. So I need to look into this more and this connection more and grow this connection more, because we're relatives,
Right.
and to honor that.
Wow, I gotta pause for a second. Robert, Kaylon, I don't know what you want me to call you, but I gotta remind persons to share this video. Por favor, puede compartir este video. El hermano nos está hablando cuando estaba haciendo una gira en desde los Estados Unidos yendo hasta Argentina, conectando con la gente indígena. Él paró en Honduras y era cuando nosotros estábamos manifestando y él vio una gente garífuna ahí y vio la ceniza, vio el tabaco. Tal vez fue una demostración con Miriam de Ofrane, y él sintió las lágrimas empezando en los ojos de él, porque él quería conectar con el pueblo garífuna. Él es taíno de Jamaica y él sintió algo cuando vio las cenizas y el tabaco. I just basically explained to them your experience in Honduras around the time of Bertha Caceres to our Spanish-speaking folks, because we have Honduras, is multilingual. The Garifuna people speak Spanish and Garifuna. Wow, that was a very interesting story, because for us in Honduras, we have been experiencing social, psychological, economic, political violence since we arrived there in 1797. And what's interesting is that during our banishment from St. Vincent, Keon, we stopped in Jamaica. We made a stop in Jamaica to refuel and to get supplies. And that's when after that, the British dropped us off in Port Royal, Honduras, Roatan, Honduras. And then from there, we settled in a Garifuna community called Punta Gorda. And from there, we made it to the mainland of Honduras on April 12th, 1797. Because I know that there were Maroons or members of the Maroon community that the British Crown banished to Nova Scotia. I'm not sure which year that happened, whether it was in the 17th century or 18th century, during the time of wars that the Maroon community was waging against the British
17.
Crown.
I believe no, you're right. It's probably around the 18th century.
Okay.
That was the Trelawney Town Maroons.
Right.
And that would have been Codgertown Maroons.
Okay.
Yeah, because what happened was, then again, I can say this here.
Right.
There is some issues in the Maroon communities as well. Not going to speak too much on all of that, but one of the facts is that you had two Maroon towns in the west of the island, the Leewards. There was Kojo Town and there was Akumpong. Today, There's Akompong and another they call Trelawney Town, and they don't really get that much support. Um, the history is that the Akompong Maroons were told by the government as part of their treaty to help quench a dispute with the Kojotown Maroons. And how that dispute came up, in short, is that the British there was a lie, and the British had punished a Maroon from Kojotown. And according to the treaty, I mean, Maroon towns are sovereign nations. How
Right.
dare they punish a Maroon?
Right. They
They
govern
should have returned the
themselves.
Maroon. Yeah.
Okay.
So they should have returned the Maroon to the community to be punished. So, war ensued. And the Akompong Maroons assisted the government in defeating the Kojotown Maroons. And today, the Akompong Maroons claim that they are the Kojotown Maroons and Akompong Maroons. But we know that they worship to majority of them, not all of them, because some still exist over there. The majority of them worship the Nova Scotia. And then they have the records, they can tell your lineage and your ancestry and your genealogy. We use a lot of genealogy here more than DNA. But yeah.
You mentioned the slave catchers.
Hmm.
There's a mosquito community in Nicaragua that
Hmm.
did the same thing, and they were recognized by the Jamaican government
Hmm.
back in the
The
day.
Mosquito King came here.
Right.
Hmm.
Now, what year
He
was
came
that?
here, and I have to check. Don't know it off the top of my head, but I know I have it in documents. But the Mosquito King was actually here on the island. And funny enough, there are in St. Elizabeth people of Mosquito descent as well. So that's another thing that we say here, that when we do DNA test here, if it shows indigenous or Native American, it doesn't necessarily mean you're Taino, because we have
Okay.
some Cherokee and some Mosquito and some other folks here as well. But yeah, they brought them here to try and catch. It was in 1755. They brought them here to try and catch the Maroons and to catch the slaves that were escaping to become Maroons, which that wasn't very successful.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, I mean, the Maroons, bro, you need to come here. I mean, I know they've been Garifuna at the Charleston Maroon Conference taking place weekend coming up. Should probably look into coming next year,
Okay.
because I always tell them to promote, and it's a nice space. There's been Mi'kmaq people there. There's been, I mean, before myself and the resurgence here on the island, there were other Taino leaders that came. There are people from Suriname, Saramaka tribe that come to our activity here. It's really about getting everybody together. You get to come to the island, so
Yeah, I
think about
already I
it.
already visited Cuba. I was in St. Vincent 2 years ago, and being in St. Vincent, going up to the windward side of the island, namely, I think it's called Oia. Oia means, in Garifuna language, the translation means to die. And that's where I seen the cliffs that Garifuna people used to leap from to kill themselves instead of being succumbed to slavery in Oia, St. Vincent. So I mean, I'm very interested in visiting Jamaica and visiting the different provinces. I mean, there's so much history in Jamaica altogether. From the
Yeah,
food,
yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Mabi, Mambi or Bambi.
Mm-hmm.
We call
Bami.
that Momoti.
Mm,
That's the Garifuna name of it. That's the thicker form of cassava
yeah,
bread. We call it Momoti
yeah, yeah.
in Garifuna.
Momo.
The cassava bread, we call it Ereba.
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 Mm,
Yeah, I noticed that you posted some Taino languages or words in a
mm-hmm.
couple of your posts. How has that developed over the years? How much words have you guys
Words. And
reconstructed,
we've been working with
right?
Jerry
Roman?
Roman, brother Jerry Roman, and that. Yeah, and the Taino resurgence. We found specific to this island. Still looking into the details on it. We found that there was what we call New Arawak, which is similar to Kalinago
Okay.
here, and there's also Ta Arawak, which is similar to Lokono here. So what we're trying to do in the resurgence here on the island is we have this language that we're working on with Jerry, Wahiani Yeri or Wahiani Taino, which it takes from the Kalinago women's language, and we learned a lot from the Garifuna language on structure, stuff of that effect, and we're also learning on the Lakona aspect because those we know were spoken here in Jamaica specifically. So so far, I mean, doing good, like very
Okay.
rapid growth. Because I know that the major Taino communities had probably 12 words for quite some time. Jerry put out a version of a dictionary that we've been working with, a selected few, and we've been growing the language. So I know my daughter will be able to, but she's learning Taino, so she'll
Right.
be speaking it, and we're looking towards having it taught, in schools and stuff of that effect. We have a Taino book out from one of our D2, Boyanani, and it has at the back a glossary. So again, and she's trying to get that into schools as well, so that there'll be more of that. Other than the words that was retained from the Spanish period, like huracan, barbacoa, tobacco, the typical ones that everybody's aware of,
Right.
to grow those. So
Well,
people can now say what their name is, introduce themselves, ask for food, like have typical conversation.
okay. Well, there's a Kali Nago French dictionary from 1665. There was
Mm-hmm.
a missionary, Father Raymond Burton, that spent a lot of time in Dominica, and he created a dictionary going back to 1665. And that book is still available. We have two two Garifuna dictionaries. We have a trilingual Garifuna dictionary with Spanish and English by Ruben
Oh,
Reyes here in California. Before him,
okay.
there was a Garifuna and an English dictionary by Ivoy Cayetano from Belize.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure Jerry knows about these two works. And prior to those dictionaries, there's a Garifuna grammar and usage book by a Garifuna professor from Honduras. His name was Salvador Suazo.
Yeah, I
It's
definitely
called
want to check those
Conversemos
out.
in Garifuna. And he talks about going back to the history, the African phonetic came into Garifuna language back in the 1300s.
Whoa.
Because the Garifuna language is made out of Carib and Arawak,
Mm-hmm.
but it's spoken with the African phonetic,
Mm-hmm.
and that's I find that to be very interesting. The fact that the
Yeah,
African phonetic is in there, and just the time period that it was injected into the language.
yeah, like those are the things that I think about. I said to myself, if the scenario, if the situation was different, how would the Maroons here have developed? Would we have been considered Garifuna? Would it have been similar if it was, you know, we had that time of peace to actually gel better with the indigenous people of this island instead of it just because majority of what they took on, I mean, yeah, there's a few words, but it was mostly medicines, it was mostly food, it was mostly how to create certain things because, as I said, it was a long period of war here,
Right.
right? So you don't really have times to sit down and tell somebody in another language how to say what to eat and good day and good morning. No, right? You're learning the necessities. Something is wrong, use this plant.
Right.
You get me? So a lot of, and I can share that with you, a good portion of the medicinal herbs that we use here and are native to the island. So that's where we have a strong retention, especially in the Maroon communities.
Yeah, I mean, we're here, man. We're here. I would say that the Garifuna language is practiced more in New York than in Honduras. Because again,
Oh,
Honduras, we have different struggles there altogether as a community. Even though it's 55 communities, but they're still, I would say, economically and politically strained. So we don't have a, a chance to really develop ourselves. So a lot of people are migrating to America because there aren't any opportunities in Honduras to live a life of dignity, of honor, and respect. Like we never were given that opportunity, but we weren't able to create it in Honduras.
yeah,
So most of like the culture, I would say it's thriving more in New York than in Honduras because the political issues that we have in Honduras is, it's up in the air. I'm not sure what's gonna happen now. I mean, whether if this person that's in office now in Honduras remains in office after this next election, after this year, I mean, it's gonna be a real dire situation because we're already fleeing by the boatloads. There's communities that don't have any more children and women now in Honduras that risking their lives coming through Mexico and eventually make it to America. I mean, that's just the reality for us now. I mean, many people have been saying that we are facing another exile
yeah,
from Honduras. But you need to come to Honduras, man. I mean, even though all these things is going on, I mean, it's still culturally rich. I'm from the province of Santa Rosa de Aguan, which is in the middle of the country, close to Trujillo. Trujillo was like the first settlement of the New World in Honduras. Like that's where they say that Christopher Columbus arrived too back in the 1400s. If you go further east, two communities past me, they still speak a flavor of Garifuna that is very pure. It hasn't been changed by Spanish or anything of the like. It's just pure Garifuna. And the children still
oh,
speak it and so forth. When you go to the communities that's closer to the city centers, like San Pedro, um,
mm-hmm.
the language is lost around those areas altogether.
Yeah, brother. You see, all that you're saying there is something that I think about a lot, right? So what's happening in Honduras is what happened here as well. Like when you are stressed like that, you don't have time to develop these parts of your culture. You don't
Right,
have time to focus on that because you're focusing on your survival,
right,
right? And um, I mean, a question that would get asked a lot is, where are the Taino communities in Jamaica? What I'll tell you is spaces that you have retentions because people are all over the island and they are wherever it works for them. Yes, we want to have a space that is central. I mean, we've established a UKUK and we want to grow and develop that. But I don't see it changing that much from the fact that people have to reach to a certain level before we can start to develop and grow our culture certain ways. It's with the Maroon communities here as well. There's this assumption that comes up. I mean, things are a little poshier for some tribes, other places, but there's this assumption that once you have some level of sovereignty, that everything is good because you have some land and you you elect your own leaders, etc. And they don't look on the fact that, yeah, but if someone else is going to tell you which land you must use and set all of these stipulations, then again, what they're doing is they're putting the indigenous people to one side, right? The side that they least prefer. Because if they want to build some roads and some highways, they're going to make sure that they put them way off to try and struggle to survive in those areas. And the stories that I hear coming from these groups all sound the same,
right.
of all of these struggles that they have to be going through, and they have to be trying to relearn their language, and they have to be trying to get their ceremonies from their relatives that in the more urban areas. It's like the same thing I'm hearing from different groups. Do you get me? And it has me thinking about a lot of this stuff about, all right, what next, what works, what is best for us here on the island. Um, to learn from our relatives, to create these connections and links. What you guys have over there in New York, it's what we want to work towards. Having these spaces and eventually having, some group where those throughout the diaspora will have systems for them to learn, will have these spaces where they come back together. Do you guys have stuff like that? Like probably some celebration that everybody returns to an
Yeah,
island.
yeah, we do have those celebrations, and that's something that we're trying to preserve because um, the Spanish and British, they have a certain way of viewing um, indigenous practices like obia. We have a spiritual system called Ogolendo, which has been practiced in the Garifuna community going all the way back to St. Vincent. And there's pockets of communities that still practice that particular spiritual system throughout Central America. It's not very popular because it's looked upon as devil worship, you know, and so forth. And due to that stigma, a lot of Garifuna people stop practicing that spiritual system and converted fully to the European religions, namely Catholicism, Jehovah Witness, Christianity. So that's something that my generation is trying to preserve as well. This practice of Ugalindo and the teachings. It only has one coach. It only has one commandment: "Aurabuni amurununu," which translates to "I for you and you for me."
I love that.
It's a fraternal, it's a brotherhood, it's a communal tenet that all of us followed in St. Vincent, or else we wouldn't have survived that experience of banishment altogether. I mean, we were banished to three islands in St. Vincent: Batavia, Bequia, and Baliso. If we didn't practice this particular spiritual system, all of us would have died. Because in these three islands, we seen half of our relatives die from 5,000 on those three islands to 2024 that made it to Honduras. So from that 2024, we have close to 1 million Garinagu people worldwide. So, but again, the issue now with us is, how do we create this oneness in an environment that's so capitalistic, which is very dog eat world, dog eat dog, and very vicious and so forth? How do we retain our cultural practices in this environment?
I think, well, some of the things that been floating through my mind space is, the activities that I see you guys have been doing. You have your online shows, you probably have some radio programs, you have stuff that people can tune into to tap into that culture. I mean, I guess in some degree we got to learn from the church, brother.
Right.
They went out there on their mission and they're spreading their message, and they have these methods that they're using to connect and to communicate. And I don't, not the method, it works.
Right.
Right? We have a day that that, all right, you tune in to hear what the Garifuna family is doing, and you connect and you share and you grow. That's what I'm thinking to do with the Taino community. I don't know of much like that that's going on, but I know for our Yukayaki, our tribe, um, we got people in the States, we got people in Canada. We got to keep them connected. Got to have these events that we get the support where they come and they share and they practice ceremonies. Um, yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, it's catching up after a lot of years of writing. Like they almost got us to write ourselves out of existence and denying yourself.
Right.
It's to come back from that. And then there's this thing that's coming up now that with people denying like the African part of the ancestry, like it's a competition. It's not a competition. Like acknowledge who you are. Like you are West Indian. right? You're born and grown here, and your ancestors were born and grown here, and they contributed to your life, to your ways, right? I honor the Yame Taino that were here back in 1492, before Columbus came here, which was 1494. And I honor my ancestors that were here in 1999. Like why would I just up and forget about that?
Right.
Slavery took place here, and they died for us too. They were whipped for us too. So I honor those ancestors as well in all that I do. I always remember them. And that's what anybody that's with me, as talking with me, as 21st century Taino, got to understand. It's yeah, I'll wear a headdress and it's symbolic, and I'll wear my wanin, which is the gold medallion of a cacique, and it's symbolic. But at the core of it, it's about the culture, and it's about it surviving for the future generations, so that they don't have the struggles that I had, the struggles that my ancestors had. My struggles felt heavy. Everybody's struggle feels heavy. And when I think about what they went through, that would have been crazy. For me, my struggles was identity, like not knowing who I was. Um, what does mixed mean? You get me? Hearing from people that I'm not black, or I'm not black enough, right? Because Jamaica is considered a black island. I'm not black enough. You know, the term they use here is coolie. I'm a coolie. And I'm like, what the heck is that?
Okay.
it, it, it,
See,
it,
I was talking to my brethren from Brooklyn last week, and he told me that coolie is a derogatory term for East Indians
East
because
Indian.
they used to fan the slave masters with a big fan to keep them cool. So I don't know how true is that story, but they used to fan the slave masters with a big fan to keep them cool. I mean, and that's where they got that name from, coolie.
But I know it's used for East Indians. I know they don't like it, right? And that was the term that they use. Now they call me, because I grow my hair, they call me either Rasta, even though I don't have locks, or just Indian. Um, but like growing up, it was crazy. It's like, all right, what am I? My grandfather is from Scotland, like directly from Scotland,
Mm.
right? And that made it even more confusing, because they see this white guy coming to school, walking home with this old white guy. So it was like, all right, like who am I in relation to everybody else? Um, so that's a struggle that when I met with other Tainos, like that was a struggle that a lot of them went through, because there was no big Taino movement. Everyone was a part of the African movement and the Black movement. Everybody was, fighting for our dignity and our pride as people of color overall. And now we have a voice, and now we're being listened to, and now we can put to the table our specific issues, things that we believe public opinion and attention should be brought to. I mean, we have sites here that they're threatened. Recently, they wanted to change the Tainos on our coat of arms, and they got a fight back from that, thank goodness. To Africans on our coat of arms, why, I don't know why they think to do that. But anyway,
Mm.
you know, I'm glad that we still have that name Jamaica, which comes from Jamaica, which was the indigenous name of this island. So we have things to be proud of, and it's really to push for that, to keep that. So as I said, the next generation will have their language. They can proudly say, that they are Taino, and it's nothing of it. We want our practices and beliefs to be acknowledged just as much as any other religious group. And why I use religious group for the term, I was saying to you before, is that the churches have a system that seems to work. They have for example, the Rastafarian is a religion, and they have their sacrament of ganja, which they are allowed to use. We want to be allowed to use our sacred medicines as well. A part of our culture, we have sacred medicines that we use, right? They have they get exempt from certain practices that would be mandated in schools, and vaccinations and all of this stuff. I
Mm.
mean, that's part of our beliefs as well.
Okay.
So we would like those privileges as well. We would like to be treated and respected like any other group. So these are the things that we're pushing for. And there's so much work ahead. I mean, the day after the investiture, I got all these emails with all of this stuff to do. You
Mm.
know, as I told you, with the ancestral remains. I mean, I know they have a day that they celebrate on this island, and yeah, those from the island that is a part of this stuff probably not gonna like it, but they have a Taino day
And
that
what is that?
is celebrated on the day that it's like May 5th or May 6th. Normally it's on May 5th, which is the day that Columbus came. And I'm like, you can't celebrate my ancestors on the day Columbus came. Like, who, what? The day that these people came to rape and kill us off? No, 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 no. Let us choose the day that we want to celebrate us. Like,
Right.
that's the day we mourn. That's
Right.
nothing to celebrate. They just tried to switch up the whole view of the day of discovery. No, no, no. So there are a lot of things,
Okay.
real things, and for our tribe, we're connected to the Maroon communities. Um, we acknowledge that our ancestors did what we call a Watiao ceremony, which is a friendship ceremony, a blood ceremony that makes them our blood relatives. Um, they were given certain spaces as caretakers that they're still caretakers of today. And I am pushing for that to be respected and acknowledged. So any Jamaican Maroon descendant anywhere in the world listening to this, you want to learn about the Taino culture, you can contact me, enroll, go, because it's your birthright. My ancestors saw the Maroons. I mean, they were Maroons. The word Maroon coming from Spanish Cimarron, coming from the Arawakan, which I believe the word was Saramabo, which basically meant it's an old Lokono word meaning the bow, the arrow,
Okay.
because they had wild animals that once they went off to the woods, they weren't coming back. They were gone. And that was the term that they used over time for, it ended up being a term that Maroons came from, that terminology. And we know that up in the spaces that the Maroons resided, there was mixture, because in Maroon communities of Nanny Town, there are artifacts right there around the fire pit. Nanny Town, old Nanny Town is not inhabited today. The short history of that is the British burnt down that village and used Gatling guns to get them out of that area, and they relocated to elsewhere. But when you go to that site, there are tiny artifacts there. There are like English pipes and other stuff there, showing you that there was some coexisting that was taking place. That there were one people. So I now can't, because I want to fit into this romanticization, write that off. No, that happened. They're relatives. They're one people. And for whatever reason, my ancestors chose to put these individuals that came from Africa, that practiced Akan Koromanti practices, as their leaders in their battles. And I
Mm.
respected them. They chose them. It wasn't a takeover. They chose these people.
Okay.
I got to respect that, right? Not gonna write it off. So we
Can
honor
you
and
explain what
accept it.
Coromante means, or what is that an ethnic
Koromanti,
group in from the continent?
um, Koromanti, as I understand it, is it's from like an Akan group from Ghana, and it's an older term. The language that the Maroons speak, the older Maroons, it's called. It's pronounced as Koromanti now, but it's Koromanti language, and it's a spiritual possession language. They mostly use it when ancestors command them. Again, as I said, very spiritual. So in certain ceremonies, the term that we use now for it is, they call it mayal, where through drumming, some an ancestor will come upon the person that is dancing, singing, they will give certain messages, but how you can acknowledge that it's what type of ancestor, it's the language that they're speaking.
Okay.
It's an old Creole mixed language. What was interesting I can share on that is uh, one of a Maroon, I think it was in New York, at university. I heard this story from one of my spiritual mothers, that is the Gamang, which means Paramount Chief. She was sharing with me that a university student from Jamaica and one from Ghana were having a discussion. And after the discussion, she heard the the girl from Jamaica speaking in Chromantic. And she came back to her and said, where did you learn that from? What's that? And she said, it's Chromantic was speaking. And this, the other female that was from Ghana was so surprised because she's saying, what what's being spoken by these Maroons is a form of like Twi in Ghana that is so ancient it's not used today. Like only few are aware of it. So again, I try to tell him that try to keep that part of your culture as well because it's nowhere else. Like it's only here. So hold on to that. That was lost. Back on the continent, they don't even speak that form of Twi anymore. So yeah, brother, there's so many gems, cultural gems spread throughout the Caribbean, and for me, this discussion that we're having here, hopefully, it open up the eyes so that others can realize all these relatives that we have, all these connections that we have, these folks, that going through similar experiences and activities.
Yes, I
For
think
me,
the connection. Well, this conversation had to be had because it's educational. Before, as I mentioned before, a lot of persons don't associate Jamaica with having an indigenous community at all. I was I learned about the Taino community via a trip to the Smithsonian about 4 years ago that I took my son to, and we saw the manufacturing process of the reba, and I was like, that's how my grandmother makes it in Honduras. And this was a documentary. It was in Cuba that the documentary was based on. And then I dug more in. I spoke to persons there at it was the Smithsonian. There's a museum, a Smithsonian museum here in New York, and that's where we had a ceremony, and it was just mind blowing to me how you know close in relationship we really are as an indigenous community to the Taino.
mm-hmm.
So then, I mean, I got into different groups of the Taino, and I started seeing so many similarities between us and them, and it was just a learning experience for me. I do plan to visit more islands in the Caribbean. I definitely want to visit Jamaica. I'm not sure when, maybe next year or the next, but I do have a trip planned over there. Now that I know that you're there and you're trying to build um, the cultural retention, I mean, we could help a lot coming from Honduras because I believe we retained so much from our heritage, going from the language to the music to the dance forms, um, to the spirituality. I mean, you definitely have to visit Honduras. You have to go
Yeah,
there.
I need to visit again.
Yeah,
This
you
time,
have to
hopefully,
go.
not with so much work,
But we,
so
we're
much
going to be in
spiritual work.
contact. We definitely going to be in
Yeah,
contact. I
brother.
mean, this is not going to be the last conversation that we have. And do you have any closing words for the audience?
Um, I mean, what I'd like to say to you all listening out there is that a part of that prophecy that I mentioned earlier about the eagle and the condor, I mean, the main focus of it is indigenous people coming back together. I didn't share what the end of the prophecy was, that once that takes place, it would usher in this period of peace. So I know right now what each in our own communities, in our own homes, have our issues that we need to work out. But the real aim and the real focus really needs to be for us as indigenous people, representing and honoring the Caribbean, honoring the spaces in the Americas, to come back together, to unite, because there's a lot of work that we need to help each other out with. I mean, with my cacique ship that took place recently, there were people in Peru that were sharing and were so proud of it because we are relatives. And I think the more that we do things like this and bring light and awareness to the activities and our relatives, that it will grow. The activities that take place that are intertribal, and I'll reach out to my brother here, so that we can have connections. I'd love to see a contingent of Garifuna representatives on the next peace and dignity journeys, carrying prayers, sharing with those other indigenous communities along the route, even if it's just at the closing ceremony where all the tribes are, about their issues, about what's going on, so that at some point in time when for us we blow we call it the wamo, the conch shell. When the wamo is blown, like we all rally together to support each other.
Right.
So
We use the conch
yeah.
shell in St. Vincent as a call for a meeting. Usually during is a call for war. And then when we came to Honduras, like since we live on the sea, we have access to the sea. We use the conch shell when we will catch like seafood, the different fishes, and to sell them, we'll let the community know by using a conch shell. And it's an instrument too in Garifuna music.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Okay.
Keelan,
Again, that
we
connection.
definitely gonna keep in contact. I mean, thank you for your time to explain the. Thank you for your time for explaining these historical data to us that I didn't even know about. And let's keep pushing.
Yeah, brother.
Yeah, let's keep pushing. And again, we're gonna continue this conversation. Definitely.
All right. Always, brother. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
No problem.
Waiting you.
All right. So we'll definitely I'm gonna inbox you after this and I have some other questions, but it's getting late and I don't want persons to I don't want to start losing persons. If you get a chance,
Yeah,
take a look at the chat because there's a couple of comments there, and if you could elaborate on those comments, that would be great as well. After you
perfect.
get off of it.
Of course, bro.
All right, Kaylon. So you have a good night.
You too.
All right.
All right.
So ahí está el hermano de Jamaica, Kaylon. Él es un cacique. Él nos dio una historia sobre mucho que pasó en Jamaica. Desde que cuando llegaron dos grupos, los Coromonti y los Akan, se mezclaron con la gente Taino, pues la gente Taino le dieron poder para que ellos puedan combatir contra los británicos. Una historia bien, bien fascinante. Me hace pensar de la narrativa garífuna de nosotros en San Vicente. Yo voy a hacer lo posible para ir ahí, ir a una de las ceremonias de ellos, para ver, porque ellos tienen muchas diferentes ceremonias ahí en Jamaica. Um, si ustedes tienen preguntas de lo que nosotros hablamos, por favor, escríbalo en los comentarios y yo voy a tratar de elaborar más sobre los comentarios. If you guys have any questions, Kaylon will answer them. Sorry I didn't get a chance to read the comments, but it's getting late and I have to put my son to sleep because he has to go to school tomorrow. But yeah, let's keep the conversation going and I hope to see you guys next week for the next episode of Mabriga Garimbo. Buiti Guyom.